Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Now, this is the first of the videos that I'm going to put together from my trip to the Mathers Foundation with Hannah back on Saturday. Now, first of all, before we go any further, it's April the 1st. This is not a joke video. I couldn't think of a decent one, so I'm not going to bother. So this is a proper video, we're not mucking about. I haven't got a huge number of clips. Quite honestly, there wasn't a huge amount of Pleiones out in the Pleione House, which is why I'm going back towards the end of April, when it will hopefully be in full flow. Several people have actually asked if I got any culture tips. Well, I'll give you what I will call the bullet points from the talk that went with our visit into this place. First of all, the Mathers Foundation have a national collection of Pleiones, which in this country basically means you've got a high representation of all the species and known hybrids. Don't necessarily have to have every single one, but you've got to have a high proportion to get awarded the national collection status, which they've got. I think they've got 5 national collections at the foundation. The obvious one is the Oncidiums and the Cymbidiums. Cymbidiums actually has not been awarded the national collection status yet. It's in an application stage, but they're highly likely to get it. Yes, so that's the status of the plants. They effectively were given somebody's collection, which was the national collection at the time. So they then began collecting in to try and increase that collection. Now they are going to start selling Pleiones, I believe, end of this year. They said, David said he will be selling them as dormant bulbs, basically because it involves far less packaging and postage charges and all that sort of stuff, and it is one of the traditional ways to sell on Pleiones. He said they're probably going to start at around £20 up to around £50. The problem with selling them is that although they have lots of types of Pleiones, they haven't necessarily got a lot of each type, and in some cases they've only got 1 or 2 bulbs. So it's going to take years to build up enough to have surplus. So those that they do have surplus will begin to be sold sometime in the near future. I've got 2, which I got from Burnham's. That's a species and a hybrid, and the hybrid is available from lots of other places as well, so it must have been either around a long time or whatever. Now, as far as culture is concerned, these are, like a lot of bulbs, they have a dormant phase. The difficulty, I suppose, for some people in growing these is during the dormant phase they need to be cold, not cool, cold. Now, Mathers heat their Pleione house to 5 degrees, so if it drops below 5 they will bring it back up to 5 degrees Celsius. So that's their minimum temperature. They could go lower, but it introduces an element of risk. So that's the low temperature they heat to. Now, if the sun gets on or anything like that, or it's not a cold night, they may be warmer than that, but they'd only heat to 5 degrees. They have been traditionally growing since they got their collection in their normal mix, which is sphagnum moss, bark pieces and perlite. But recently they've started using ceramis, or ceramis, however you want to pronounce it. As Jim said, bits of brick, which it is basically, it's baked clay, which is what bricks are made of. But yes, they've been trying that with some success, but the downside of that is it holds nutrients, so there can be accumulations of salts, which means you've then got to flush more often because of the media itself, if you see what I mean. So that's more of an experiment, although they do seem to grow well in it, with the precaution of no salts build-ups. Now, on a strange and almost contradiction in terms, they have discovered that they're actually very heavy feeders. Or let's put it this way, you can get bulbs twice as big by feeding heavily in the growing season, and leaves half as big again as normally shown on that type of Pleione. So even though I've only got the two, they will go into the higher feed run in my place rather than the low feed run like the Odonts, Masdevallias and things. So yes, they can be high feeders, but you need to watch any salt build-up. They don't like heavy salts around the roots. They like to get a heavy feed and use it. So that's that. Light levels, well, given that they can be grown outside in the garden, you've got a frost-free garden, then you can grow these on your rockery. The thing that does them in as far as keeping them outside is concerned in the UK is the rain in the winter. They don't like to be wet in the dormant phase, so if you had them in the garden, you'd have to shelter them from extreme low temperatures and from wet weather, so they'd be a bit of a faff. I will be keeping mine inside. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do for the cold, because I'm down to 12 degrees in the winter. It's probably not cold enough to actually generate a good flowering from the dormant bulbs. So I might have to put the dormant bulbs, not in a pot necessarily, or unless the pot's bone dry, outside, yeah, and only bring them in if the temperature's due to drop lower. But I'd have to find somewhere sheltered to keep the rain off of them. That's some thoughts. Apart from that, they are a bulb. They have a dormant phase, and then as they come out of dormancy, there's a new growth from the bulb, which produces a flower, and then a leaf. Yeah, so they flower on leafless bulbs, basically. Then the leaves come later. And between the leaves and the roots, they grow a new root system with that new growth. That's what feeds that bulb. The old bulb eventually withers and dies, but they are capable of producing bulbils, like most bulbs, like your daffodils. If you dig up a clump of daffodils, some of them will produce little bulbs, which can grow on into flowering size. So if you're lucky enough to get those can be separated off and perhaps grown in a seed tray, something like that, until they get to flowering size. And the goal, as far as I'm concerned, is a pan-shaped pot, you'll see some in the video, with a mass of blooms, because that seems to be how they look their best. Individual blooms in a pot on their own don't look so clever. I don't know of any that have multiple blooms on a single new growth. So I think they are single bloomers. So that's that. Without further ado, I've put the clips together with a piece of music as usual, because of the hubbub of noise that was going on while I was filming. And as I said, there wasn't a huge amount in bloom. I've done my best to capture what was there, and hope you enjoy it. There's more videos to come from that visit, but this is the first. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.